said in previous stories that 2013 was a great year to be a tree, and this is particularly true in the eastern United States and Canada, where we had a growing season that most people say they've never seen before. I certainly have never seen a growing season in the last 35 years that was as good as this one is. So we're going to take a look at shoot growth in this year. In previous posts, we've talked about the evenness of precipitation, the evenness of temperature, the evenness of soil moisture that allowed trees to grow much more than usual, but we're going to take a look now at exactly why that occurred. We'll look in detail at a tree here growing in Gratz Park in Lexington, Kentucky, in front of the Carnegie Center for Literacy and Learning. This is a swamp chestnut oak, Quercus michosii, lovely ornamental tree, and we're going to take a closer look at the branch pattern and the branching of this tree. And here it is up close with the lateral branches showing the newest growth to the left and older growth to the right. To simplify even further, we're going to take a branch off of this tree and set it down and take a look in more detail. Here's a branch. To the left are the newest leaves, and to the far left is the growing point or terminal bud that produced this entire branch. We're going to take off some of the lateral branches and simplify even further. Now we're going to focus only on the growth of this single branch over several years. The leaves that you still see on there to the left are the leaves from this year, including those kind of crinkly yellow leaves that we'll talk about at the end of this video in a little more detail. Now let's take this into the lab and mount it upright so we can see in more detail. And here again is the terminal bud, the growing point that produced this entire branch over a number of years, a true terminal bud. And now we're going to take a look at growth over several years. Here's the 2009 growth, 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. The arrows represent where that apical bud was at the beginning of each growing season. And we'll take a look now at the rate of growth. Each of these growing seasons was represented by a single flush of growth that began in May and ended in June, almost regardless of what the weather was like. 2011 was not a very good year. 2012 was a very good year, but nonetheless there was still only a single flush of growth in most trees. That oak trees started in May and ended sometime in June. 2013 was different. We had a flush of growth and then a pause. That first flush took place in May and June, but then a second flush occurred in June and July, another period of rest, and a third flush occurred in July through September, and really only came to a stop around mid-September. We haven't had any frost yet. It's been fairly warm weather. We call this pattern recurrent flushing, where in a very good year, a tree can produce more than one flush of growth with a pause between each flush. In a later video, we'll talk about why that pause occurs. But this recurrent flushing pattern is common, but it's extremely rare to see 3 flushes of growth in a single year. It's more common to see 2 flushes in a very good growing year. So the typical pattern is 1 flush or 2. This year we had 3 very vigorous flushes of growth, again showing that this was an extraordinary year for tree growth, thanks to the evenness of soil moisture, the evenness of precipitation, and the lack of really hot weather. Just to take another look at that branch before we took the leaves off of, I want to call your attention to those crinkly leaves on the left. Zoom in a little bit so you can see them better. The humidity was very high when these leaves formed, and they got attacked by powdery mildew. And in central Kentucky, this is a common problem in the summer because we have pretty high humidity. And those leaves got pretty well hammered by powdery mildew. So they didn't benefit the tree very much, but on the other hand, the shoot was continuing to grow. So in spite of the powdery mildew, it was still a very good year. So in sum, this was a great year to be a tree. Evenness of precipitation and soil moisture and temperature allowed trees to continue growing through the growing season. The majority of trees this year grew by this recurrent flushing pattern. Grow, pause, grow, pause, grow, pause. In our next video, we'll talk about different patterns of growth and see what happens with trees, fast-growing trees like cottonwood.